everybody. Welcome back to Deep Thoughts. This is episode 3, and I'm joined today by, again, my friend Trent. How's it going, Trent?
Pretty good. Glad to be back.
I'm glad to have you back, man. So, this episode, we've been talking a lot beforehand, but I'm excited and also terrified. This episode is going to be about happiness. We have very different opinions on this, but I'm curious how we'll figure it out. So, first off, um, Trent, how exactly do you define happiness?
All right. So this was a actually a hard thing for me because I had a couple of different ways I wanted to define happiness, but I think the way that I most am in alignment with is I believe happiness is being content with your surroundings and what you have.
Okay. So I guess to dive deep, when you mean surroundings, do you mean like friends, where you live, who you surround yourself with work on a daily? What does that mean exactly? Because that can be all over the place.
Really, all of it. Like it like kind of like everything combined like adds to your like overall happiness. Because like you can be happy in one area and like let's use work. You can be happy
Hmm.
with your colleagues, what you're doing. But then let's say you come home and you're not happy with your living situation and whatnot. So like
You sound like an abusive
it's
husband when you say like you get
yeah,
home drunk and then just beat your wife. That's happiness.
I mean it's cathartic. Come on, no, we don't support
We
this.
don't condone that. That's a joke. Thank you, 2021.
um But no, I think it's just being content with what's around you, and because like I think like even in like really bad situations, if you're content with what you have, you can still be happy.
Okay. Okay. So my definition of happiness is like a little different than those two things because for me, I know that was kind of how we started this whole thing, but it is pretty important that goals is kind of like where it starts. In
Hmm.
my life, I've always had goals. When I was a kid, my goal was to go to college. After college, it was to, during college, it was to graduate, and then after college, well. So I guess one way to explain this is that I think you're at college is the most independent, but also safest you are in your life. When I was in college, I had three goals: get over a 3.0 GPA, have an internship under my belt, and graduate without any debt. Before I was
Okay.
even in college, I worked towards the no debt part by working several different jobs and saving up. And living in Oklahoma, that was pretty easy to do because it cost nothing to live there. When I was in college, that's when I kind of had to discover how to get the GPA up, how to make balance that, and then also to get an internship. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to get my GPA up, I was able to have the internship, and I was able to graduate without any debt. Like I accomplished those goals, and I was really happy.
Hmm.
However, after that, that's when my life was really tough, and that I didn't really have any goals because after you graduate college, after you get that point in your life, it's tough to go like, where do I go next? Because college
Yeah,
never
because
just. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, it feels like during those times in your lives, people like gave you goals, and then you kind of like got to the point where like now you have to give yourself goals.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I do kind of miss when you have to go to class from like 7 a.m. to like noon, and then you have to work for 3 hours
Hmm.
after that. Like you can time your homework, and everything was so much more strategic and laid out. And like especially right after college, that was really tough for me to reorganize myself. And that's where, I hate to, it's always weird to define or happiness, but that's where I was like, I can kind
Hmm.
of define I wasn't happy because I was kind of lost. I didn't have any goals, I didn't have any direction, and I had to create that myself. And it was really tough. And that's where, I really began to think about like, hey, like goals were important to me, and I need to continue to do that in order to be happy. And so I guess it's pretty black and white for me, but do you measure your happiness in the way you kind of defined, or like what's your thought on that?
I so measuring my happiness in the way I define is kind of a tough one because the way I defined it's
Hmm.
so loose
Right.
and
All right.
like so ambiguity
There's a
whatever
lot of ambiguity.
ambiguity,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
okay. I
um
practice saying hard words all day.
I because I feel like to measure happiness it's all based on you as a person and what you feel.
It
And
is
I
a
know
bit.
like feelings can't be trusted and all
Well,
that jazz.
I mean, we're talking about a feeling, so that's totally
Yeah,
fair.
I
And,
mean,
and I'm
yeah.
quantifying it, which is very robotic. And yeah, but I get it. Like in terms, you kind of get. For me, I'm trying to measure happiness and graph it and chart it and all that stuff. And you were trying to like live your life to find happiness based on the situations you find yourself in. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's a lot more accurate. I'm more just kind of going through my life and just kind of like vibing out my situation. And if I'm vibing with this area, then I tend to be more happy. Then I kind of go towards that area. Instead of being like a very structured, it's just more like
Hmm.
I'm gonna do kind of a little bit of everything. And then if I resonate with something, I kind of like go more towards that way.
I actually like really find this interesting how we have very different points on this.
Oh
So,
yeah.
like, what exactly? How do you? So for me, you can ask me too when after.
Yes.
But I'm curious. So you kind of go with the flow, and you're able to find happiness through circumstance. Like, if you're
Yes.
fortunate if you find it, and you're very unfortunate if you don't find it. Have you ever
Exactly.
thought of, you know, uh, goals and measuring your happiness like that? Have you ever thought like, hey, maybe this isn't the best situation right now, whatever time in your life, and you're like, I need to figure out how to turn this around and kind of almost have a strategy? Or has this always been a thing where you're like, hey, like I'm here now, but I'll just keep doing my thing and we'll see what happens later.
So I have tried that and I don't like it. I really hate it. Like for the long term
Hmm.
specifically, I like having goals and strategies in the very short term.
Sure, sure.
So within like if it's like a month long goal, having the goals and strategies like is like mm, wonderful.
C'est
But
magnifique,
like to
yes.
go past like a month, it the goals become more crippling than they are
So
helpful.
you find it constricting to have goals, like
Yes.
you're almost locking yourself in like that. Well, like, did you have a
Yeah.
goal that I feel like there's a story there. Like, was there a goal that you said, "Hey, I'm going to do this with the next amount of time," and it wasn't achieved, or you felt like you kind of had to keep thinking about it a lot? Was that the experience
I
that
mean,
happened?
really, any goal like working out, dieting, job, it feels like the more I try to force myself down a path,
Hmm.
the less I enjoy being on that path.
Such a free spirit.
Yeah. So I kind of want to circle back a little bit. So you're
Sure.
talking about like when the time that you were without, you kind of were with, you're kind of lost
Yep.
and you didn't have any goals, and that was when you were unhappy.
Yes.
Would you say that your happiness isn't based on goal? I mean, they're kind of the same thing. So,
It's more like the
would you say
outcome
your
of the goals, and that just kind of gives a compass to it. But keep going
yeah?
with your question.
So, would you say that your goals are more based on, or your happiness is more based on goals, or just having structure to your life?
It's a good question. Shit, I'm supposed to have the good questions. It, it's easy to say it's a combination of the two, but I think I'll explain it like
Yeah.
this. The goals are the compass. They are not the map, and the structure is the map. So the goals basically
Okay.
add compass, and I'm able to guide myself through that structure and then find the happiness. And I know that's very like systematic, and I even feel like I'm like, Greg, do I feel like, what I mean? Like I feel like stubbing my toe to make sure that I'm still human. But and that way, like I think it really I did goals a lot because that was kind of how I was raised. And then after college, when I was really, unhappy with currently not having any direction or not having that compass, that's when I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, I need goals to work. Um, and I guess a little sidebar, this also it's not infallible. It definitely has issues in that
Hmm.
there's been times where I've had relationships with friends or romantic interests where that conflicted. I had a goal and they wanted to go with the flow. And so one thing to kind of
Okay.
say you're correct a little bit is I do think when you involve other persons, you need to have that flexibility. If you're very strategic, they do think you're a little bit inhuman and you're not considering the feelings involved because at the end of the day, I think the first and last thing that we deal with in our day is how we felt about it rather than like how did we execute X task and what numbers were we
Hmm.
able to quantify and blah blah blah. Also, I'm not a math magician, and I call it math magician because it's like magic to me. So
Honestly,
I'm
right?
not really that mathematical crunchy kind of guy, but yeah, no. So I do see your point when it comes to having some freedom with that, but also going back like having that map and that structure.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that because Especially like when I was a child in my earlier life, I
Mm.
was much more focused on just follow the feeling. And so
All
if
the
I felt
feeling.
like, yeah, if I felt happy here, I'd follow that. And if I didn't, I'd get rid of it. Like
Did you get in
just cut
trouble
and
with that?
dry.
That sounds like really kind of risky. Like, hey, it feels good to steal candy. Let's keep stealing candy.
No, I knew I stayed within the bounds of lawfulness.
Okay, cool. I mean, I didn't mean to make you commence a crime in a recording or anything like that, but
But yeah, no, but I would say during that time I was also struggling a lot with like mental health and a bunch
hmm
of different things like that. And so follow the feeling ended up getting me in trouble, but not in the reasons. At least I took what you were saying.
hmm
It I ended up following like the wrong feelings. I became way fixated on this idea of happiness. Like when you look at like when you're scrolling through social media and you see like people on beaches and parties constantly and whatnot,
hmm
and just like this fake sense of happiness and what it meant to be
Yes.
happy.
Yeah, I guess a side note on that one. I hate social media. I think it's the worst thing ever. So it's just basically people broadcasting either the most depressing stuff to get attention to kind of redeem that, or just to brag. I feel like the idea of it was like, oh hey, we're keeping in contact with persons we don't live next to.
Hmm.
We don't have the old rotary phones anymore. We need to upgrade. I get that. But at the same time, it creates this falsehood that people kind of surround themselves with and almost like like that's their life, which it's not true. And so if their life
Yeah,
is
and
going in the downhill at all,
obsessing over this fake image
yeah.
of themselves.
Also, like it's proven. Like I wish I had the research, but I don't bring research notes to this, Trent. I give you an edge on that. But it's proven in some research. I think people quote me if I'm wrong that people like are actually shown to be more unhappy if they stay on social media and they kind of keep
Yes.
on having those highs and lows. It makes them a lot more like all over the place when it comes to their moods. And that's why I have a Facebook, but I'm really not active on it. So
I want to call you old for having a Facebook, but I
that's
can't.
old.
But
Yeah, you can
yeah,
call me old because I'm. Huh?
having Facebook is old, but the problem is I also have a Facebook and use it actively.
I don't use it actively because I've seen your post, Captain Politico. But
Hey.
it's good to have opinions. Let's put them on billboards. Why not? But I don't know. For me, I kind of stay on there in case someone wants to contact me. Anytime I scroll, I just always have this like feeling in my gut. I'm like, oh my God, Jason has a
Mhm.
flying car. I wish I had a flying car. Oh, Jason's a
Yeah,
douche.
and I genuinely felt like I spent too much time focusing on that type of stuff. I mean, personally, I didn't fall too much in the social media hole,
hmm
but I fell in the hole in various different areas.
Like what? What's
Um, like relationship or like drug and alcohol use more
Oh, okay.
specifically.
Okay. Well,
And I got really into that stuff.
I was gonna say like and in terms of happiness, I think this is something to take note of. Do you believe a lot people have more control over that happiness than you'd like, or are you at a state where you're completely independent and you're like don't have to worry about other people to contribute to your happiness? You're able to kind of create that yourself.
I used to be solely happy based on other people. Like when I was a kid and my young adult like life,
hmm
my happiness solely depended on other people's happiness.
Okay.
And over the years, it's changed to more. I'm more focused on my happiness. It kind of went from like one
Yep.
extreme to the other extreme, and I went all the way to like my happiness is the only thing that matters, and if anyone tries to get in that way, I'm just like bye.
Oh, okay. That's a
And now I'm trying to like reel it back from
You're
that.
trying to moderate it a bit. It was one of those things you
Yeah.
gave out everything, lost it all, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna keep everything now, and then like realized that I guess that kind of ruins the happiness rather than kind of spreads it out kind of deal. Is that
Hmm.
fair to say?
And yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And a part of the way like I ended moderating that
hmm
is to still follow the feeling, but to also have like like these short-term goals and kind of broaden these goals to have like a little bit of
Oh,
structure.
someone uses goals, huh?
Well, it kind of because I realized it's like, oh, I'm really happy if I do something
Sure,
during my
sure.
day.
That's given. That's
So
given. I mean, you can't go with the
yeah,
flow all day. Like you gotta have like, I'll be really happy if I get paid this week, you know?
yeah, exactly. And it's just like, okay, well, I have to start caring a little bit and have some short-term goals to at least make sure my day-to-day life doesn't get tedious and boring.
Sure, sure. Uh, so I guess I'll kind of answer the same question. If that's okay. I
Yeah.
think that is maybe that's just growing up, where you just realize you think almost the world but you is perfect, and so you look at like their
Mhm.
opinions are so much more important than my own, and I need to make them happy, and then that happiness will trickle down to me. But as you get older, you almost get a little cynical. You're like, hey, like let's think about me, and then you kind of moderate
Mhm.
it back. I just kind of I'm still at the I kind of look out for me, and then I'll reel it back when I need to, if that makes sense. Like
Okay.
I am trying to. It's something I need to work on when I involve other persons to think about them. But realize for me, it's like if I'm happy, I do know that that is contagious. As long as the happy isn't created by being vindictive to another person or almost taking it from them. It's kind of what I try to
Yeah, like
focus on.
happiness at the expense of others.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's basically just bullying, which I think when we were kids, we just did it, or well, I was a bit of a bully sometimes, but I also got bullied too. I think it definitely varies based on the social groups, and so I did it not even just to be malicious, but it was almost like a weird contagious high I'd got from it, and it just obviously look back and like that was just being mean, and I don't know why I was doing
Mhm.
that, but so
Hmm. No, I definitely agree with that. I don't know. I mean, also at the same time, a lot of people tend to forget other people are people,
yep, yep.
and like other people, you being happy doesn't necessarily make other people happy. Like, I mean, like to a point, like yeah, your happiness spreads and whatnot, but the things that make you happy don't make other people happy, and sometimes it's really hard to like understand that.
I think it's important to think like this, like from a perspective. So let's say you're you and you have this friend that's
Hmm.
always upset, always down. Eventually, you kind of just get tired of it a little bit. You're like, hey, dude, like you're doing everything you can. Like I had this one friend of
Hmm.
mine that always complained about his work. And initially, I think when you're friends with someone, you're like, hey, this is some advice, especially like
Hmm.
in the culture I was in, that was very like, you give advice, they follow it if they need it, or they ignore it, whatever. But the thing is, if you ignore it, have some other plan in place or some other idea. Don't continuously be upset. And so he kept complaining about work. I'm like, hey, get a new job. You can do this, this. But he never did any of that. He just complained about work
Hmm.
over and over again. So his unhappiness was clear, it was evident, and it was almost at the forefront of all of our conversations. So eventually I just stopped talking to this individual just because it's
Okay.
like, you're just like weighing me down and maybe a little bit like, what do you call it, selfish or something. But
Hmm.
if I'm trying to be happy and you're not, then I feel like our interests aren't aligned and I need to go my separate ways.
I I do agree with that because I feel like that's a very healthy thing to do. I mean, because
You mean healthy to
if
vent or
someone
to cut people out of your life
uh,
that are just almost self-destructive?
yeah, to not have the self-destructive people also bring you down.
Hmm.
Because like it's one thing to be sad and whatnot and to help them out, and like maybe they're in a long sad spell, like that's fine. But if their unhappiness is making you unhappy, and and you don't have to like depend on their happiness, like let's like they're a colleague, so like
Mm.
their happiness isn't like super important to you, because like I mean obviously if you're in like a long-term relationship, if they're
That's
unhappy
more,
then
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like you need to do something about that. But if it's a colleague, you have no, is it liability, or no,
I
you have
mean,
no responsibility
yeah,
of
that's a
making
good word.
sure they be happy.
So, like,
And
you're
so
making it sound like, so that wasn't my coworker, by the way, it was a friend of mine.
I, for some reason in my head I thought you were talking about a
Well, he talked
coworker.
about work. That's fair. That's fair. I'm curious. Did you
Okay.
did you ever have a coworker that would always just bring you down while you're working with them?
Oh, I've had plenty of coworkers, friends. Yeah, like I always found myself attracted to
Negativity.
like-minded individuals. Yeah.
I'm always, oh man, like I'm always worried about landing on that landmine with you, man. Like, let's talk about the darkness of happiness.
Well, actually, I wanted to get into that a little
Sure,
bit because you
sure.
brought
No,
up,
I guess let's
uh,
jump on. What's up?
yeah, because you brought up your friend being unhappy, and yeah, obviously, if their happiness is bringing you down, it's probably best that you talk to him at least a little bit less. But what does it mean to be unhappy to you? Like
Ooh,
what?
the
Yeah,
opposite
like what?
question, but such a different answer.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be unhappy to me? I feel like it's just this this almost sounds like your happiness, to be honest. A little bit like wandering. Like you don't know where you're going. You're kind of just going with the
Okay.
flow, but in a way that is not helpful to your mindset at all. Like you're literally like wandering in a fog rather than in a sunset or a sunny area, a clear day. And so
Okay.
when
So
hmm,
would you say that not being happy is bad?
I feel like not being unhappy means you're just looking for the path to be unhappy, or to if you're unhappy, you're just looking for the path to be happy. And so I think it's fine. However, if you just decide to keep going down and doing the same things over and over again and continuing your unhappiness is bad. And that's something that I don't
Okay.
like being a part of because if you start gathering a group, you're just making the crowd bigger and bigger that don't know what they're doing with their life and becoming unhappy. So you're basically, you know how we talked about multiplying happiness? This is multiplying
Yes.
unhappiness. This is an energy, or what do you call it? Like a proton or something, which is like the lack of
Yeah, yeah.
whatever. I think there is a thing like unhappiness and happiness. But I think we have enough things in our society that say, hey, this is unhappy, this is happy.
Okay. I kind of agree with you.
You can disagree too.
Um
I'll pretend it says kind of disagree, and you go ahead.
yeah, I mean they're basically they're the same thing. Um to me being unhappy is simply a lesson,
Like a lesson as in less than, or a learning experience.
a learning
Okay,
experience.
okay.
Cuz like it's you're unhappy for a reason. And so that means the situation you're in, you're not content with the situation you're in, and so there's something that you need to change.
Okay.
And so I see unhappiness not as a bad thing, but as a like an error message pop up like, "Oh, hey, low battery," or something like something's
Okay.
not right that you need to go fix. And
Hmm.
so it's not so being unhappy isn't by itself a negative trait, it's simply a warning sign.
Okay, that's fair. Like, and I guess is it when you're in the full warning, is that like depression or what like you're making it sound like there's a step further.
Oh, I mean, like beyond that, if you like dwell in it and whatnot, because you can focus on like let's just use the tech lingo because that's it's a
Sure.
little bit easier. Like the uh icon flashes for like low battery,
Sure.
and
Okay.
you just focus on like, oh my gosh, like my battery's low, I have so much work to do, like how could you die on me right now? And you're just like you feed into this negative thoughts when all you could do is just go grab a charger, plug it in,
Okay.
and then that solves the problem.
Huh.
And I'm obviously not like saying
Yeah.
depression's that cured that
Well, I was
easily,
gonna say
but
also like that's a great analogy in that a lot of times we just focus on our happiness rather than the solution to that unhappiness. I think that's
mhm.
extremely pertinent in our society, which is unfortunate. And I guess to go back to what social media feeds that, it says focus on the battery, not the charger, constantly.
Yeah, it's
And
focused on being happy, and the lack of happiness is a bad thing.
you know, I guess so. I guess to be clear on that, is it okay to not be happy?
Oh yeah, I think in a lot of instances it's really good to be unhappy in the short term because
Okay.
then you know what about your life you don't like as long as you can figure it out, obviously. But like if I'm unhappy now and I can figure it out, then I will be quantifiably happier because I fixed a problem.
Hmm. So I guess one question, like I make it always very clear that I want goals, I want direction on that. Is that when you would use goals for it, or is it
Yeah, that's
possible?
when I would add the whole goal system, like short term adding goals to fix the situation.
So is it fair to say, like, if you're happy, you're going with the flow, you're maintaining the status quo, looking for improvements when they're clear, but when you're
Mhm.
unhappy, you're like, hey, like, I need to think harder about this. I need to figure out what to make me happy to get me back into that, on that road
Yeah,
to be on a
and
free state.
yeah, like structure my life a little bit to kind of figure out exactly what in my life I'm unhappy about, fix that, and then carry on.
Do you think like we just naturally become more happy over time, or do you feel like it is a lot more like case by case, or what?
I think it's a little bit more case by case. Because I feel like it's really easy to kind of allow yourself to focus on all the problems,
Mm.
because the older you get, the more problems you're going to face,
Yes.
like
Yes.
just by the fact of time.
Hmm.
And so if you struggle with pulling your attention away from the problems, you're going to see problem and problem and problem. They're just going to keep adding up, and you're not dealing with the situation. You're just looking at it.
So do
But
you this is kind of a weird thing to add. So do you think when you get older you get smarter? Is that fair to say?
no,
Really? Okay.
I think you get wiser, because I think wisdom and intelligence are two different things.
Wisdom being life experience, smart intelligence, like what would define those two? I hate to go on another track
Like
there, but
like intelligence is book smarts, wisdom is street smarts.
so why do you think if you get older you don't get more book smarts? You just stop learning or
I mean, it's dependent on who it is. I mean, some people stop learning after high school or even before then. Some people never stop
I
learning.
mean, I hate learning nowadays, so that's fair.
I love learning
So then
nowadays.
your intelligence is going to go up, my wisdom's going to go up. They're different stats.
Well, I think you can raise both the stats. It's just I think as you get older, your wisdom will always get better. But I
Okay.
feel like if you get, but the intelligence is based on how much you put into it.
So the reason I ask that though is a lot of people believe that if you get smarter, you get more unhappy because you're more like aware of your situation, and oftentimes you're able to critique it in a more efficient way, and thus you find shortcomings and become more unhappy. Do you think that's true?
No.
No. Okay. Why not?
Uh, strictly because I base happiness on content.
Okay.
And so you can know a lot of bad things, but if you're content with your surroundings and you're content with like the actions that you're committing, then you can still be happy even though you know like a lot more stuff and a lot more bad's going on.
I think you could like to always counter that. I hate to be such a positive Polly, but if you're smart enough to see the bad stuff, you're also smart enough to see the good stuff. In our lives, we have a bunch of things going on. We have to
Yes.
translate, we have to, um, configure, we have to, decipher a lot of our environment, ourselves, and our situations. And if you're able to think so negatively about it, I think that just comes not from necessarily intelligence, but like you said, like your state of being. Like if you're actually content
Hmm.
with your lot, if you're not content and then you're smarter, then you'll become more discontent. And if you
Yes.
are content, then you can become more content. And the mind is a super powerful thing. Like, and it's kind of crazy how some people let themselves become victims to it, and others just um, let that run their life. Others just kind of fight back.
Hmm.
How's that for deep thought?
I think it's pretty deep. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm a little bit drowning in it.
uh, no, yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well, honestly. Because I hear a lot of people are like, oh yeah, there's just the more intelligent you are, the more you see all the negative in life. I was like, yeah, but you're choosing to see more and more negative, and you could choose to see more and more happiness. Like I get in our brains that our brains are hardwired to focus on the negative more because that's like survival instincts and whatnot.
One
If you
compliment
see the
versus a
negative,
thousand insult, or one insult versus a thousand compliments.
yeah, like our brains are hardwired to like focus on the negative because then we know what to avoid and all that jazz.
And is it like a prove as well? Is that something like it sounds like you're more what's the word here? Knowledgeable in that particular way, like the hardwiring.
I think so. I don't want to say yes, it has been because it's been a while since I've kind of looked into it, but I think so. At least that's like the main theory of like why. I know that for sure.
Okay. I like that though. That's a good point where I forgot all about that because if you think about your day by day, a lot of people they can have a fantastic day and then one thing ruin it. And I fell victim to that last week. I had a really bad project and it really killed my buzz for a bit there. But yeah, I guess one last thing I really want to ask, and then we can call it at that point. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
do you think you're able to find happiness, Trent?
Yes, as long as I continue working towards it, I can find it. Because me and a friend kind of brought this up, and it's really something I kind of live by. Is stagnation is death,
Ooh, okay.
and so as long as you're moving forward, you will be fine. But if you stop and dwell, you're gonna die. Not like figurative, like
I
physically, but figuratively.
I figured that out. I mean, I guess if your heart stops, that's
Yeah.
death. If your brain stops thinking. Uh,
So I think as long as I continue moving forward and continue living life, I'll be perfectly fine.
I agree with that. Man, I want to disagree with you so hard, man. Like, it's the same for me. As long as you keep pushing forward, and I feel like this is one of those. If you're depressed, watch this video about happiness. Like, no,
Yeah, right.
but I mean that's just how I naturally feel too. Like I even told you before we started. I'm like I'm gonna be pretty organic. Like we have a little bit of
Hmm.
notes, but nothing too. And the same thing. I do think it's important to push forward because it's when you're younger. I think it's easier to say stop and to stop moving, but if you keep going, you'll find that momentum and keep pushing yourself. And I think that is a good idea to not focus on necessarily the moment. Like obviously appreciate it if it's a good moment, but if it's a bad moment,
Hmm.
find a way to push forward either way.
To learn from it and to like carry on.
Yeah, you can get around the wall sometimes. You don't have to break through it.
Yeah, you can get over, you can go to the side,
I'm
or
not much of a
some
climber. I'm gonna go around.
bashing your head in is like just a great way of
Y-
doing it.
You know, I was like, okay, you've seen the super or not like spy movies where they like torture the spy or whatever, right? And you're like, oh man, that'd be
Yeah,
easy
yeah.
for me, right? I like stubbed my toe the other day. I'm like, I'd be the worst spy ever. Ah! Like, so when you said
I
bashing your
u-
head against the wall, I'm imagining doing that, and I'm like, I'm not doing that, Trent.
I don't want to get into it, but I did a lot of that stuff on my own because I was like, I wonder if I could take it.
Well, it probably made you stronger. So. But you
What?
kept pushing forward. I guess that song, whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Is that true
Uh-huh.
or false? I say false. If you
Uh,
chop off my arm, it doesn't grow back into a thick muscle. Okay.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, in some senses, it's true.
How is that? Oh, I guess your right arm becomes stronger. Are you gonna argue that? Because I'm gonna chop off my left. You bet. I'm not chopping off the good arm. All right.
Well, you like when you work out and whatnot, your muscles are tearing and ripping and whatnot, but like eventually they heal over and they become stronger.
I mean,
So,
whatever. Maybe we'll have 30 minutes talking about if making yourself intentionally weaker makes you stronger. Okay, whatever. All right. Anyway, so that about covers my points there, Trent. Did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap it up?
no, I think we're good. I think we covered everything.
Okay, because I mean, like, it's great to have a long video, but 30 more minutes, that's a lot of YouTube time to upload, so we're good on that. But
Yeah.
anyways, great talking to you again, my friend, as always. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss happiness and what your opinion of it.
Oh no, I'm glad to sit here and discuss any deep topic that comes across your mind.
Of course, of course. Our minds, Trent. Our minds.
Yes, our minds. The deep ocean of our
Deep. I
minds.
mean, that we're if you're watching this video, you're under the water just like the rest of us. I don't know when we're getting air, but it's gonna happen eventually.
Yeah, we're drowning together. Don't worry,
We're
guys.
drowning together, exactly, in our minds. But anyways, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. And if you have anything to add, go ahead and add a comment. Be sure to add a like. I'm trying to get more exposure. I've got some plans in order to do that. But thanks again, Trent. I appreciate your time. And catch you everyone on the next one. Take care now.
Adieu.